Well, hello there. I didn't see you come in. Make yourself at home. Have a drink. While I give some attention to some underappreciated characters and storylines that I personally love. And I hope you grow to love as well. Hey there, everybody. Just letting you know, the podcast you're about to listen to is the free version. And all that means is that this is way behind where I'm at in the actual Patreon version. So if you're liking these Hellblazer episodes and you need to have some more, you can't get enough John Constantine, then fear not, I got you covered. Go over to patreon.com/planestrains-and-comic-books and sign up for the Hellblazer tier, where we are at least 30 issues ahead of wherever we're at in the free version. And once again, you can find those at patreon.com/planestrains-and-comic-books, all one word. All right, enough of that. Let's get into some Hellblazer. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Matt's Minis Hellblazer. Today, we're reading Hellblazer number 11, and we're finally finding out what happened at Newcastle. This name has been said to us over and over again about John's past, and they've been hinting at it since, his inception in Swamp Thing. So we finally get to figure out what happened at Newcastle. But first things first, we start with the cover here. It's got that same esoteric feel where there's weird stuff in the background or the foreground. Like there's a broken doll, and there's some paper with writing and stuff like that on it. And then we see this wispy smoke kind of in the black of the background. There's a face of John Constantine, and the word Newcastle is scribbled onto the front, kind of like how a child would write it or something. I don't know, different cases and stuff. So this is written by Jamie Delano. The art is by Richard Piers Rayner and Mark Buckingham. So we start off, and it's nowadays. And when I say nowadays, I mean current time for Hellblazer. So it's the 80s, the late 80s, I guess. And if you remember last issue, we had a revelation that the demon that John supposedly fought at Newcastle when he was younger is supposed to be, or at least they alluded to, that it's Nergal, the demon that gave John a blood transfusion, so now he's got tainted demon blood, and the demon that wanted to have John overthrow the Resurrection Crusade and all that stuff. So that is why he has come to Newcastle. And of course it's raining and it's very dreary, and he goes to a junkyard in town, and John's looking through this mountain of cars, the stack of cars, and a baby doll's arm falls out of one of the cars, just kind of foreshadowing potentially what's going to happen. And we find out that this is actually not just some random junkyard. It's the old, I guess it's where this club used to be, called the Casanova Club. And that is a place that John used to hang out. And it is now dilapidated and falling apart and surrounded by all these wrecked cars. But then we cut to the past, and we see it used to be a place that John Constantine's punk band used to play at. And we get a whole cast of his old friends who all have died now because that's just, I guess, what happens when you hang out with John Constantine. But we get the breakdown of the whole team. There's Frank, who is the biker guy that died in Swamp Thing, and Judith, who was the woman who betrayed them in Swamp Thing and ended up causing almost the end of the world when she helped the Brujeria kill all of John's friends in South America. And then we see Richie, who burned up in the computer world. We see Benjamin, who in this he's 12 years old, but he looks the same as he did in the comic when he dies earlier. And then there's Gary Lester, who is from the first issue of Hellblazer. He's the guy that had the heroin addiction where he was injecting bugs into him and he tried to capture a demon. And then Anne-Marie is a older woman who, at first I was like, wait, who is this? But that's actually the nun who gets killed, because I remember it was oh, Sister Anne-Marie. But in this, she's not a nun yet. She is just an older woman who hangs out with these younger kids because she's got a crush on Constantine. And he knows it, so he kind of uses her and gets her to do things and help him out because she's attracted to him. So they go to this Casanova Club, and I guess this is taking place in 1979, because it said it's a decade earlier than this comic is coming out, and I believe it's supposed to be 1989 when this issue came out. So as this youthful group of friends walks up to the club isn't in very good shape yet, or still. I mean, it doesn't look as dilapidated as it did at the beginning of the comic, but it still looks pretty kind of not in use at the moment. But they pull into the parking lot, and they have like a mystery van basically that they ride around in. And this is like, for all intents and purposes, it's Scooby-Doo, but with real demons and magic and shit. So they're all going to this club because apparently it's been having like disturbances, like supernatural disturbances. And John knew from his band days that the guy who owned the club ran in the occult and was kind of like a sex and drugs musician, he says. And John played here with his band. Mucous Membrane was their punk name. And and John says, afterwards, he had invited us down to his chapel to get smashed and do some magic with 6 nymphets and a bunch of seedy hippies. So it was basically just like this guy kind of dabbling in magic and using it to get people to have sex, just kind of create an atmosphere of maybe like cool environments, but also like see some actual magic happening. And as they're walking in, everybody's getting a bad feeling. Like everybody's like, whoa, smells really bad. And there's like one of the girls is like, oh, I'm getting like a bad vibe here. Something awful happened. And Benjamin, the little kid, goes to a door and he's like, hey, what's in here? And I love that Benjamin's supposed to be like 12 and he's hanging out with like John, who's, in his early 20s with all these other people that are like way too old for him. And he's just tagging along. It's just a fun time for everybody. And as John approaches the door, he's narrating that when he was a kid, he used to go up to a truck in our street that was taking the offal and the cow heads from the abattoir from the old Bates Boneyard, and you couldn't see inside it. But it had a stench behind it, which stuck on everything for hours, and it lined your throat and lungs with the slime and putrefaction. So as he opens the door, that is what hits him, this smell of death. And they look inside and they see all these mutilated corpses of people, and I'm assuming the owner of this club. And everybody's freaking out, of course, and even John is, freaking out as well. So everybody is seeing this, and they're kind of like, what happened here, And John remembers, hey, that guy had a daughter, and John had mentioned that when he was here playing, he met her downstairs in the chapel, and that it was really creepy that this guy who owned the place would keep his daughter around like the sex stuff that was going on. And apparently he would actually, include the daughter, who was a young child, in all this sex and magic stuff. So, and when I say that, I mean like they actually molested her or whatever too. So, and when John was in Mucous Membrane and was down there, he had talked to the daughter, got this weird vibe from the guy that something's going on with the daughter and everything going on in this cellar. But he didn't report it or anything because I guess he didn't see any of it. He just left and was like, I'm creeped out by this dude. So that's the last time he had been here. So he came back because of the disturbances and all this, and they find him and all of these people that were in his sex dungeon or whatever, all dead. And so now they're like, okay, the daughter's not here. We should look for the daughter. And they hear a noise upstairs. And they go upstairs, and what it is the daughter is kind of dancing around, but like if she's possessed kind of thing. And the daughter's name is Astra. And John, I believe John's mentioned that name, when talking about the events of Newcastle before, but this is the first time we're actually seeing what she looked like and what happened to her. And the one thing that's very obvious is they used reference photos for a lot of these characters, I think. And John was modeled after Sting from The Police. And it looks like this little girl is kind of modeled off of Newt from Aliens, I think. I don't know. She looks kind of like that. And as she's dancing, they're talking amongst themselves like, do you think she saw the bodies downstairs? And John's like, yeah, I think she saw the bodies. And so they go to talk to her. They're like, hey, remember us, Astra? It's your friend John from that band. You remember? And she's just kind of laughing, kind of like, I imagine it's kind of like Evil Dead when they're all laughing and stuff because they're possessed. But she says like, he didn't you hear it? The Norfolk thing got him. The Norfolk thing. So John begins to kind of talk to her, and we find out that John's feeling he got, the creepy feeling he got about the guy who owned this place was correct. She confirms that the dad made her go into the cellar and with him and his friends and the girls from the club and get drunk and take stuff and get bare, and that she'd have to watch as they touched each other, and then they would touch her and she would have to touch them, and it's just all bad news all around. She says one of them has too much of the stuff and hurts one of the girls. Then he's hurting me. I get scared and angry and no one will help. So I think and think and think of the very worst thing that anyone could think of. And it comes to help me. So basically, like, she was just, in desperation, and either like a demon or she was able to make an apparition come out and start murdering all these people. So they're like, wait, what are you talking about? What is this Norfolk thing? And the friends of John are like, do you think it's real? Do you think this creature is actually here? And John's like, you saw what's down there. What do you think? And Frank, the biker guy, who's his friend that dies later in Swamp Thing, is like, we should get the hell out of here and just torch this place, Like, might as well just kill everything that's in here with fire. And John's like, no, we can't do that. This isn't some, like, rival biker gang. It's an elemental terror, and we've got to fight fire with fire. So what we have to do is raise a really powerful demon to destroy it, which sounds like a terrible idea. This is young John Constantine, who's full of piss and vinegar. So he's kind of making fast calls about everything. I mean, he already does that in his adult life, but apparently he was even more reckless as a youngin' just getting into magic. So as they're talking about, how to do the spell and all that stuff, they hear a scream and they realize Benjamin is not with them, Benjamin, the young kid, and they run into the room that had all the dead bodies and everything. And apparently Benjamin was just trying to take pictures of everything for posterity, I guess. And as they rush into the room, they see he's almost being attacked by a giant demon wolf apparition. So it's like covered in all the gore and everything of these bodies, because I think maybe it was like in the pile of the bodies and they just didn't notice it before. So as they rush in, Frank has a shotgun and he shoots at the demon, which I guess makes it disperse. I don't know. It somehow just kind of disperses as it maybe realizes that they're not a threat to Astra, because it is tied to Astra. It's like protecting her. So I wasn't sure if this is actually a demon or if it's like just she has some kind of psychic ability and can make this apparition come just by force of will. So after the wolf disappears, John goes into demon summoning mode or whatever, and he's trying to manipulate everybody to do what he wants, because this is a large group of people. Not all of them are on board with Constantine's plan. One of them being Richie. Richie's like, I don't really want to be part of any of this. So John's like, hey Richie, why don't you go take Benjamin out to the van and sort him out and give him a vodka or something. And then he talks to Anne-Marie, who's the nun later on, but she's the older woman in the group who's got a crush on him. And he tells her to stay with Astra, and he'll put a protective circle on the ground upstairs, and that they'll be fine as long as they don't come out of that circle. And she's like, if you're sure. And he's like, that's my girl. So like he's definitely like flirting with her in order to make her kind of do what he wants. He sends Frank to go make a bomb in case everything goes bad. And so like Frank's outside, Richie's outside, Benjamin's outside, Anne-Marie's upstairs with Astra. And so he turns to Judith, who is the hot woman in the group, I guess. And he's like, Judith, you come with me. We have to prepare ourselves. And she's like, you mean tantrically, of course. So he's just like, yeah, let's go fuck. we gotta fuck before this, we raise this demon. And possibly my favorite interaction out of this whole group is when Gaz, who's Gary Lester, we find out that he's basically like a tag along in this group. John is not really fond of him that much. He just kind of puts up with him and isn't really, really good friends with him or anything. And that's why in the first issue, it seems like they have they obviously have a relationship, but it's not like they're best buds in that or anything. John kind of tolerates this guy. So as John and Judith are about to go have sex, Lester comes up to him and is like, "What about me, John?" And John's like, "Oh yeah, you better go see if you can find a black cat so we can sacrifice it." So Gary then leaves to get a cat, and John and Judith prepare themselves. So by that, I mean they have sex. And afterwards, they're preparing this altar with the book that he has for magic and stuff. And there's like a chalice. It looks exactly like you would think, like kids doing occultic stuff and what it would look like. So as John and Judith are getting everything prepared, Lester shows back up and is like, "Hey, I got this cat, but this bastard thinks it's a tiger. It scratched me all over." And then John's like, "Hey, you know what? Actually, I changed my mind about the cat. I don't need it after all." So he just literally sends him out to get him out of the way so he could have sex with Judith. Because the way that Gary Lester is acting around John is, he's the kind of guy that would probably be like, can I watch or whatever? So like he just had to send him away to make sure they get private time. So anyway, they are now ready to do the spell and they begin the ritual. And there's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but I'll read a little bit of this ritual because it's kind of weird and interesting. But John is saying, "This is the rod of the art, hazelwood cut at the hour of Mercury. This is the parchment played from a virgin kid. This is the knife of the art, forged from new steel on the day of Jupiter." So there's just like all these little relics and stuff that they have that they've had to gather in order to do this. And then he starts drawing on a piece of paper with a quill, all these symbols and everything. And he says, "By this talisman and this naming character inscribed in blood with the pen of the art, I wake you Sagatana." And that's what he is saying the name of this demon is. That's what he was under the impression the name of the demon was. And if you know anything about magic or anything, I don't know that much. I'm just going by what I know from Hellblazer and other sources like that. Basically, if you have to know the demon's name in order to control it. So he believes the demon's name is Sagatana, and that is why he's like, I know the name of you, while he's calling the demon up. And he says, "I conjure thee, appear in human form, fair and agreeable, without noise or inconvenience, in order to obey my will." And then they pause, and nothing happens. They wait for a bit, and then he's like, "Come on, you bloody bastard." And also because he just looks like an idiot in front of his friends who he's kind of made think that he's this awesome magician, but they're all just kind of dabbling and stupid kids. So his friends are kind of like, "Wow, that was a bummer. Should I get another cat?" And they're laughing at him, and he's like, "Quiet, shut up. It's not over yet. The tricky bastard's playing hard to get. You've got to show him who's boss." So then he calls out again, "Sagatana, once again by the power of the art, here wrought around you by the names of your lords, Lucifer, Beelzebub, Belial, attend me now, or burn forever in the fire of the suns." And so they pause again, and nothing happens again. And he's like, "I can't understand it. I've done everything that was in the book." So he ends up just thinking that maybe that book was a fake and that Benjamin didn't get him a real copy of the actual ancient magic text or whatever. But while they're talking about that, we see upstairs some figure is appearing to Anne-Marie, who's upstairs with Astra, in the circle of protection. And someone calls out to her and is like, Anne-Marie, are you sleeping? Shall I slip into your dream, Anne-Marie? Do you want me? And she wakes up and she's going, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, come to me, Anne-Marie. I want you." And she's like, "Yes." And we look and she's seeing John Constantine and he's naked. And she is into it. Of course, she has been lusting after John and wanting John to notice her in the group. And so she's like, "Yes." And she leaves the circle and goes to embrace him as he's like, "Kiss me, Anne-Marie. Fold me tight into your warm flesh. Embrace me. Now feel me, Anne-Marie." And as she's feeling him, we see his body is covered with some weird, like yellowish green slime. And as she's like rubbing all over him, basically he explodes. I don't know, like this stuff explodes out of him and covers her And it's very, very like sexual, obviously. But he says, "Ha, woman, you are spoiled. Run now." And as I guess she's freaked out by this, and this stuff is like in her eyes and her face and everything, she's like, "No." And he says, "Run, get thee to a nunnery." And she just runs out the top window of this place and falls down to the ground. And she's up at the top. So this is maybe like 2 stories high. And then we cut back to John, Judith, and Gary, who are still trying to make this spell work. And we see little Astra has walked down the stairs. And John's like, "Wait, what are you doing? It's not safe. You have to get back. Go back up to the circle." And Astra says to him, "But you called me. I heard you call me." And as she says that, they begin to hear growling start. And they're like, "Oh no. That dog is being called back because she's scared." So John's like, no, Astra, don't wake him up. And Gary Lester is like, "Oh, I'll just grab the little girl and take her." And John's like, "No, whatever you do, don't break the circle," because they're in a protective circle as well. And John asks Asta, where's Anne-Marie? And she says, "Anne-Marie jumped out the window." And as they're taking that in, the dog bursts out of the floor. So like, the spectral demon dog. And it begins to move towards Astra. And Judith thinks that it's going to eat her. I don't know why it would eat her, because it's conjured by her, so you think it wouldn't. But as the dog approaches, Astra is like, "Here, boy, come on, come to mommy." And it kind of slowly goes to her. And it kind of like rests its head on her shoulder. And she begins to rip its head off and grabs his head. And we see as she turns around that her eyes are red, and she is obviously possessed by a demon. And John's like, "Oh my God, it's in the girl." And he's like, "Sagatana, Duke of Darkness and Despair, I command you, under heaven's fire, leave the girl unharmed and submit to my instruction." And she's like, "Submit to you? Ha! I have obeyed you all I choose. Did I not come? Although you could not make me, did I not assume a human form, fair and agreeable, without noise or inconvenience? Did I not dispatch this mad, corrupt deformity, although I owed you no allegiance whatsoever?" And Constantine yells back, "Leave her now!" And the demon says, "As you wish." And it begins to vomit out of her. And so we get to see the real form of this demon, or at least the one that's going to show John. And it's like a big blob of a bunch of different monsters and heads and everything just kind of smushed together in a giant body of gross stuff, basically. And this is where John realizes, possibly I've made a mistake. So he narrates, "The ritual did work. The demon came, but not directly. The fibers of sanity's rope stretched to extremity, fray and unravel. A hideous miracle transpires before our eyes. Creation, the ghastly, bloody birth of nightmare." So that's what he's looking at, this giant, bloody birth of a demon. And it speaks to Constantine and says, "You are pathetic, Constantine. Wallowing in ignorance, you seek to constrain me? Know you not the root of all power is naming, and you have no conception of who I am. The character you described was mine, but Sagatana's not the name that fits, and thus your invocation lacked the weight of magical imperative." And John asks, "Well, why did you come then?" And it says, "Because it greatly pleases me to chasten ignorance and corrode the brass of vanity. It is with the witless of your sort what hell enjoys its finest sport." So it actually doesn't rhyme, which is always fun. I don't know if it's just because demons sometimes talk in rhymes, but that's fun. So it tells John, "Now that I've come back, I want a fee, and I'm going to take this child Astra's soul as a fee." And John freaks out. He's like, "No, I screwed up. Take me if you must." And the demon says, "You? No, you are already mine, and your friends. Fresh blooms to be anticipated, plucked according to my whim. I want her now. There is no negotiation, although, as a special dispensation, if you insist, I give you leave to accompany her below." And so he gets to walk Asta's soul into hell, and he kind of holds her hand as he tries to walk in, but he can't because it's kind of like no mortal person can just walk into hell because, they'll freak out and they just can't force themselves to do it. So he tries one more thing. He pulls out a magic wand and he's like, by the power of Adonai, the one who rules all with this consecrated rod of the art, demon, I blast you too. And as he's saying that, it turns into a snake in his hand and he drops it. And this, of course, pisses off the demon. So it kind of doesn't allow John to walk into hell now. And John's like, run, girl, as the demon's teeth kind of close in around them because they kind of walked into its body to get to hell. And so John is trying to run out of hell with her, like with, holding onto her hand. And he's telling her, run, girl, run. And this is intercut with what's going on the outside of the building. It looks like Frank has indeed made a bomb that will burn the place down in case something bad has happened. And something bad has happened. So Judith and everybody has ran outside and told Frank, hey, it's gone bad. There's an actual demon and it's going to take this girl and everything. So Frank is arming this gasoline bomb or whatever and is about to set this place on fire. And they look and they see John running out and he's still holding on to her hand. And as he gets outside, he realizes he's only holding on to her hand. It's just her arm. He has ripped off her arm as she has been pulled into the gates of hell. And his friends are trying to be like, hey, John, look, give us the arm. We'll take care of it. And he's like, no, you leave her. You can't part us. Not now. We've been to hell and back. So he's like kind of having a moment here. And then out of the flames, you hear the demon say, weep now, children, rant and tear your hair. Remember, hell is eventually your home. Consider this a taste of things to come. And Constantine yells out, no! And then we cut to the modern day again, which is 1989. And he's looking at this thing, and we see next to him are the ghosts of his friends who have all died. All of them have, their souls have been, sucked to hell or killed by the demon or whatnot. So he is the only one left out of the group that was there at the club back then. And so he looks down and he sees that little baby arm of the doll. And that's why I said it's foreshadowing, because it was like the arm of Asta that he had. And so we also learned out that he was in Ravenscar for 2 years after that incident. And Ravenscar is like a psychiatric facility. So he went through like a mental break because of all this happening. So he says, we all paid. Anne-Marie took holy orders. Benjamin got his stutter. Lester got his junk habit. Richie went into the computers. He says Richie went into computers, which is kind of funny because he actually went into the computer. And then Judith went to work with abused children, and Frank went off biking around the world. So that's what happened to them before they died and met in Swamp Thing, which we've already read. And but he says, but like I say, we all make mistakes, and the demons was finally telling me his name, Nergal. This is where we started, and this is where it will finish. This is the killing ground where I take my revenge. Just as soon as I work out exactly how. So he's got a smirk on his face. He is ready to take on Nergal finally and get his revenge for everything that happened in Newcastle. And that is the end of the issue. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com. And we will see you on the next one.